Some of my favorite storylines of G.I. Joe were those stories that Larry Hama wrote in the 1980s. But I think my favorite story is from G.I. Joe number 21. It's called The Silent Interlude. It was the first comic book I had ever read. Well, I actually didn't read it. There were no words.
The Silent Interlude comic, what's special about it is there's no dialogue. The whole comic. It's done through frames, it's done through great action, it's done through character movement, and the storytelling is all done visually.
So it's the story of Snake Eyes taking on Cobra, and it was completely done without words. It's absolutely unbelievable at the time, and I've never forgotten the story.
The inspiration behind the first silent issue was the fact that the book was behind schedule. And editorial asked me, "Gee, could I produce an issue really quick?" And I said, well, if I write it and draw it at the same time, and then we skip the lettering, then we can get it out in 2 weeks. And we did.
He had not a lot of time to write this comic, and he knew he wanted to tell a story that was an open-shut story. You know, there's no hanging loose threads. It's not a continuous spine story like a lot of those original run of the real American Hero comics were.
The monastery was inspired by an old issue of Larry Hama's comic called Silent Interlude. We thought, you know, it should be a colorful scene, and it should be a scene where the action plays out, where you wouldn't need dialogue to understand it. It's as simple as just fighting and chasing. So we set it in a monastery. It was Snake Eyes versus Storm Shadow with Jinx thrown in and some red ninjas thrown in. And I think roughly, I don't know, 8 to 10 minutes of the movie passed without a single word of dialogue. And only the hardcore G.I. Joe fans will notice that it was based on that comic.
And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any movie that's been out in the last 30 years that has, 8 minutes of straight silence. I mean, again, there's a music cue and so forth underneath it, but without character speaking, that's a pretty rare and cool thing.
The screenwriters knew that they were just going to have cinematic ninja combat happening in the mountains. And from that standpoint, it's very much like this Silent Interlude episode. You've got the set piece of the mountains, you've got a castle, which is the Rashkagi temple, you've got red ninjas, but you've got the cinematography of these lines as they try to escape it, and the beauty of using the screen as a palette for telling these stories without words. And I think that the music and the energy that you get out of this scene is exactly connected to the Silent Interlude comic.
We originally had the characters using flying squirrel suits to jump down off the monastery and fly all the way down to the ground. And when we pitched that, Lorenzo said, "Oh, this is bad news for you, but we just used that at Transformers. Michael Bay just broke out the flying squirrel suits." So we had a moment of frustration. But then we found a guy on the internet, a rock climber, doing a thing called rope jumping, where essentially he would fix ropes to a mountainside, and he would climb very high. And instead of bungee jumping off of like an elastic cord, he would jump off the cliffs using his own fixed ropes to swing down off the cliffs. And we thought, oh great, that's the perfect way that Snake Eyes and Jinx can escape.
We needed to have them swing to the mountains a certain way on certain lines. But because we were actually swinging to the mountains on lines, that was part of the storyline, we didn't need to try and hide the harness. Of course, usually you're trying to hide the harness under the clothes, and then it puckers, and you've got to deal with that. I was saying from the very beginning, we actually have a reason this time to have harnesses on.
The decision to use silence also flowed from the fact that Snake Eyes doesn't speak. If we had any challenge during this movie, that was probably our greatest challenge, is how do you integrate Snake Eyes into scenes with other characters and not have it seem ridiculous where he's acting in pantomime. So we thought, oh, wouldn't it be great just to do, a big long sequence where it doesn't matter that he's not talking because nobody's talking. So that drove the decision as well.
It's a very good sequence, and obviously we did portions of that on green screen when it got more detailed and more close into the fighting and flying over each other and things like that. But we also did big portions of it and all the zip line stuff and the rappelling and whatnot for real in the practical location.
harkens back to what G.I.JOE has done in his career, which is sort of take dance moves and turn them into fight sequences. And so there's a ballet element to it, a dance element to it, but in a very cool way, because of course ninjas are very eloquent when they fight, and that fighting style sort of comes across. So you have these guys going across a mountain range. They're fighting for their lives. The way that they're choreographed, it's both incredible to imagine when we first saw it in animatic, and then as they shot it, it was incredible to see how they were shooting this. And then ultimately, as you composite everything together, I think for the audience, it's something you've never seen before.
It is a unique scene. I mean, there's no scene that's ever been done quite like that. It makes it pretty memorable.
I think it's tough to translate any comic book from 1980 whatever into a cool extravaganza today, but the scene is very cool and retains enough of that silent interlude, issue 21 of the classic comic book series. The people that want to find it, it's definitely there. It's not one for one, but it's very honorific of it.
射手和渣男，被台湾传奇了，是吧？